Hello, everyone. I'm Alan Kirk.
And I'm Richard Britton, and we welcome you to another episode of The Word at GV.
And today's word, Richard, we're going to discuss discipline.
Discipline.
And we talked about, for weeks, about discipline in the church and so on and so forth. But today, I felt like we needed to talk about, like, self-discipline.
We're going to narrow it down.
Yeah, okay. Because from a cultural standpoint, and we don't want to get into politics and we don't want to get into certain subjects, but, I think we are seeing the results of a lack of discipline in our society. And it's been caused by what I would call raising free-range children. Okay?
Yes.
It's free-range children raising them. And it kind of falls back on like a Montessori kind of concept. Montessori teaching is, you put them in an environment that you allow them to teach themselves and learn themselves. And it's a way that if they buy into their teaching, then they'll learn better. Well, our society has created boundaries around itself through, government, through media, and it's established its own boundaries. I mean, every time you turn on the TV or you watch the news, they're telling us how we're supposed to think and act. Now, people may agree or disagree with that, but we are being exposed to free-range adult learning through the media, and we're learning the wrong values.
Well, it's all kinds of values are being expressed.
Right.
But they're not equally valid, are they?
Right. I mean, we're in this mode of right now in our culture that, my truth isn't your truth, and that's okay, and you need to accept me the way I am. And, and it's not a matter of acceptance. It's a matter of truth. And, God loves, let me qualify this because I don't want the wrong concept to go out there, but God loves everybody.
Yes.
God loves the lowliest, dirtiest, filthiest of sinners. In His eyes, He would go and save them just as much as He would the rich and the famous.
Yes.
There's no differentiation between the two. He loves His creation and He loves everyone. The problem is that we don't see God the same way He sees us.
Right.
And our society right now is living in a culture that lacks self-discipline, that lacks the effort of wanting to discipline itself in order to establish correct boundaries, I guess would be a way of putting it. And what's happening is we're seeing the results of that lack of discipline in our society, such as rioting, killing, thefts, this will have been a few months ago, but the killings in Nashville at the Christ Covenant Church or whatever the church was, school. Guns are not killing people. People are killing people.
People are killing. You see a real clash of belief systems, of differing values, and it resulted in one group or one person killing other people because they didn't agree.
Yeah. That child who is now in their 30s or whatever that walked into that church school and killed those 3 children and 3 adults had lack of discipline because they weren't taught that. And if they were taught it from their parents, that child had a problem from the very beginning. And here's truth. And I know this is going to be difficult for people to hear, but the truth is, I wonder if she was raised in a Christian home. And here again, I'm not judging. I don't I don't know the situation. She could have been mentally, chemically unbalanced. I have no clue. But, it's funny to me that in our society that culturally we almost glorify people by putting their names in the paper, by killing little children and adults, and then somebody else sees it on TV. Well, I can get my name on TV. And I know I'm scattered in my in my thought process here, but we truly do not have one standard that should apply to everybody. It's kind of like the law. The law should apply equally and justly to everyone.
Yes.
And even the law flip-flops.
It's not applied in the same manner to
No.
everyone, is it?
No.
Yeah.
But from a biblical standard, we do have
Right.
justice that is served.
We do, in the Bible, have a standard
Mhm.
that is the standard, and not everybody embraces it,
No.
but it's there.
Right.
And a careful examination of what's in the Scripture. I mean, I find it wonderful that there's laws that say it's wrong to tell lies,
Yeah.
or it's wrong to murder.
Yeah.
And,
Because it applies not just to
Yeah.
you, but it should apply to everyone if it's
Yes.
applied and enforced.
Yes.
Yeah.
If everyone wouldn't lie, and everyone wouldn't murder,
Right.
everyone wouldn't commit adultery, to me, the benefits are obvious.
Right.
But if we decide, well, I'm going to murder, or I'm going to lie, or I'm going to commit adultery, it's not only going to affect me, it's going to affect someone else.
Right.
A lot of people are going to be affected by that. So mankind, when we choose to rebel against God's laws, we're hurting not only ourselves, but our fellow human beings.
Culturally, yes. Yes.
Yeah.
It's affecting them as well. And, that's where our humanity, we're always talking about humanity and acceptance and inclusiveness and things like that. But those words are fine, but they have to have some sort of boundaries attached to them so that everyone is justly on the same playing field. That's why God gave us the Ten Commandments. That's why God
Yes.
gave us the laws.
Yeah.
Cultural laws to the Jews, but also as well to the Gentiles. So,
Sometimes disagreements, as bad as they are, they shouldn't culminate in one party murdering another party.
no.
I mean, that's a terrible way to resolve differences, but sometimes they resort to that.
Well, and that's what's happening in our society today.
Yes.
Exactly. So, what are some of the forms of discipline from a biblical standpoint that God applies to us?
Well, the first one that comes to mind is Adam and Eve.
Oh, absolutely.
They were provided with a perfect environment and access to all the trees of the garden, and there was one prohibition: do not eat the tree. Do not eat the fruit from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil.
Right.
They decided to go against that and disobey God, and they ate the forbidden fruit. The consequences for their lack of discipline, they refused to discipline themselves and obey the Lord.
Right.
So they experienced God's discipline. If they didn't discipline themselves, God will discipline them later, and He disciplined them by evicting them from the garden.
And separation from
Separation,
himself,
yes.
which was terrible.
It'd be terrible to get evicted from the Garden of Eden,
Yeah.
but that's essentially what was accomplished there. And
Right.
Cain was he decided to murder his brother Abel,
Right.
and there's 7 times in that passage in Genesis, I believe it's chapter 4, where God is speaking to Cain. The word brother is used 7
Yes.
times.
Yes.
And it's terrible that Cain has killed Abel, but in the conversation between God and Abel, the term brother is used 7 times, and it's making it very apparent the family loyalty
Right.
that mankind should have with each other
Right.
has been obliterated by Cain. He literally killed not just another human being, but his own brother.
Right.
And that's
Right.
in a sense, God really wanted to emphasize that in that passage, that they were brothers, and we should absolutely love each other,
Right.
and a physical brother should be honored
Right.
implicitly. But that was one of the things.
Well, and we have, the one thing when you were talking about the Garden of Eden being kicked out of the Garden of Eden and the separation, how could a loving God be like that? Well, thank God He is.
Yes.
That He is eternal, number one, but that He's always the same. He never changes. He's
Yes.
consistent. And so when He gives direction,
Yes.
whether it's through the Ten Commandments or His law, He stands behind that.
Yes.
Unlike the secular law that we experience in our culture today that changes constantly, and updating the law, or some minority group feels like they're being misjudged. The thing that I've always heard, and I've told, that people are always seeking justice in this world. Well, this world will never be just. The only justice that's going to be found is through God's justice. And the biblical standard is a standard that stands the test of time. God never changes. Man will. Man's law will. And so discipline is at one time before we were saved, we were undisciplined because we did what we wanted to do.
Yes.
And now that we are under God's discipline, because we've placed ourselves there, because now we know the truth, then we are glad to follow His discipline.
Yes.
Because it's for our own good, and we know that He loves us.
Yes.
And it's like I talked earlier about self-discipline and when we were children, and it's like a child in a shopping center that's having a meltdown.
Yes.
Where have you not gone that you haven't seen a child do that? And we allow that child to scream and holler, and hopefully the child thinks he's going to embarrass the parents so that they'll get their way.
Yes.
And if we act in ignorance and allow that child to have his way, what kind of child is that going to grow up to be? Not realizing boundaries, not
Yes.
realizing that that child needs discipline so that they will discipline themselves and hold themselves accountable to a standard. And a lot of people say, well, what is that standard? What kind of standard? And we've said it over and over again, just in this episode. We've said it over and over again. The standard is the Bible.
Yes.
And if everyone, even if you're not a believer, even if you don't believe in religion, this book is the standard for cultural standards for the entire world. And so, if we would just pay attention to that
Right.
and bring ourselves under subjection to it, that fairly and justly judges us
Yes.
and disciplines us
Yes.
for our own good. And we have one standard then.
Absolutely. Just the idea of having a standard, if everyone subscribed to that standard and adopted it, it would eliminate an awful lot of problems.
Yeah.
I wouldn't steal your lawnmower. And
Well, now wait a minute. I got a brand new one, so don't be.
I might, but I remember listening to someone trying to present a case against the commandments, and when the topic of theft was brought up, when someone steals your car,
Right.
then you see the value of those commandments. When
Yes.
you've been victimized,
Right.
but if there's nothing wrong with stealing, well, it's okay unless they steal your car.
Right.
Then there's something wrong with it. So
Right.
the point is, it's always wrong to steal. And
Well, we always look for fairness and, what's fair in this world, and, how come they do this, and I understand.
yeah,
But, we have to be a little bit more self-disciplined, because if we're not, as a culture, if we're not self-disciplined, then we're going to end up with a society with groups of people growing every year, every generation, that will become dependent, just like that child screaming and hollering in the store.
Yes.
They will grow up to be adults screaming and hollering and wanting attention instead of self-reliant,
Right.
self-disciplined, knowing boundaries,
Yes.
being good for society and contributing to society instead of
Yes.
being dependent on society.
Yes. There's a sort of a progression. I'm glad you brought that up, but if a parent disciplines a child when they're young, then they grow up and they'll more than likely be disciplined in society, so they don't have to be disciplined by the police or the court system.
What is that in Deuteronomy? Train up a child in the way he should go, and he'll not
Yes.
depart from it.
That's in Proverbs, and then Deuteronomy 6 is instruct your children, teach
Yep.
your children, and
Yes.
but if it starts early, you're actually doing the child a great favor.
Absolutely.
And then the police won't have to do it. They might get 10 years in the penitentiary if they break the laws, but ultimately there's a much higher authority, God Himself.
Yeah.
He will discipline those who.
But Richard, are we actually seeing good results from that? Where, if they go to the penitentiary or they're in the jail, I mean, I don't know that, and I know that people come out and there's good circumstances
Yes.
that are associated with that. But I think the majority by far, I don't know that we're really rehabilitating somebody by just throwing them in jail and saying, you need to be
No.
better, and then releasing them at a certain, because really, we're putting them at a disadvantage.
They're just confining them.
Yeah.
And I deal with people who've been to prison frequently, and they've lost years, just years of their life are gone. They can't recover them, and some have experienced a heart change.
Right.
Usually in response to Christ, they've met Jesus somewhere along the way.
Right.
But others have not really had that encounter. So they're prone to repeat
Right.
the same.
And do you think, in your opinion, they learn self-discipline? Have they learned any discipline or any kind of lesson by being in jail?
They may be deterred a little bit by the punishment that's coming.
Right.
But sometimes that just makes them better at evading arrest. I dealt with a lady once who'd been arrested 37 times. 37 times, all kinds of criminal activities.
Shouldn't that tell us as a society that there's something wrong with the system?
Yeah.
That we need to change that? And I believe that there's ways of rehabilitating people that have lost their way or
Yeah.
on the wrong path. But you know what? It takes discipline to do that.
That person
They need to be subjected under the discipline of authority to learn what it means to be disciplined so that they can self-discipline themselves.
Yes.
You know.
Her desires oftentimes conflicted with what was legal, and she let her desire determine her behavior, and it cost her. And she's
Consequences for our actions, just
Yes.
like you said in Adam and Eve and how they were kicked out of the garden, and then Cain. There's consequences for our actions, and when we don't see or feel the consequences for our actions, such as a child having a meltdown,
Yes.
if there's no consequences for that,
Yeah.
then they're led to believe, I can do it again. And then I can do it again.
Yes.
And it's repeated as an adult
Right.
to the point that it's detrimental to our society. And we have numbers of people, numbers of groups out there that are no longer self-disciplined. They don't understand what authority is. There's a lack of respect for police officers, for anyone in the uniform.
Yeah.
You
You
know.
can see the breakdown. Just imagine an army, and everybody's just going to do their own thing.
Yeah, that's it. There you go. That's exactly the United States. We just do our own thing. And
Yeah.
I'll tell you, if people want to go back and tear history down,
Yeah.
before they tear down the Roman Empire history, go back and read it
Yeah.
before you destroy the book on it, because we're going through the same process that the Roman Empire did. Now, it's a little bit different, you know, just going back and reading history, you know, their borders were a little unsecure, and they kept acquiring more and more outsiders, and they allowed them to patrol the borders. And of course, they got lackadaisical, and then they were being eaten up from the inside with cultural issues of you know, homosexuality and some of the other things that degraded their society. And so it just kind of, the whole empire just kind of like fell apart. And it was because of lack of discipline and self-discipline.
When Rome was disciplined, they were very powerful, a very powerful
The world.
empire. Yes.
Yeah.
But internally, their own self-discipline, their internal value system
Values, yeah.
was corrupted, and it led to their fall. There's a lot in discipline. If we can simply train people to obey a code of behavior, and that code would be established by the Bible, it would improve an awful lot of things.
Well, my encouragement would be to parents today in our culture, that it's never too late, as long as you have your child at home, to start disciplining and talking with your child and teaching them in the way they should go.
Yes.
And if, as an adult in our society, that our legislation and our, you know, our government and things like that, that we need to look past the immediate fix, and we need to look at a long-term fix, and that long-term fix may be in something like our prison systems and the way we have them set up. That maybe we need boot camps. You know, I don't know the exact. You know, I don't have all the answers for it, but I do know that it lies somewhere in teaching our children and our adults, and in schools. We need to have taught self-discipline again, and what that means, and we need to bring back consequences for our actions. Because I'm going to tell you, there was a long-lasting consequence in Luke, right?
The Gospel of Luke, yes.
With the rich man and Lazarus, right?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
And his consequence for his lack of discipline and just ignoring who Jesus was, and this, of course, was Jesus telling the story, was that eternity was spent in hell.
Oh, my goodness, yeah.
Where
What a
Lazarus was resting in the bosom of Abram.
Yes.
You know, so his consequence was permanent, and we don't want to see anybody go through that, because once you die, that's it. There's no, you've made a choice.
God will ratify your choice for you,
Yeah.
and He will award you the consequences of your choice.
He gives us every opportunity in the world to turn to Him.
Yes.
And if we choose to keep ignoring, if we choose to keep having a lack of discipline, having a lack of any concern or care for what is to happen after we die, then He will. He will definitely ratify that. He will say, He'll stamp it, and He'll say, well, depart from me, I never knew you. And, you know, are you willing to gamble? Are you willing to say, I'll live my life the way I want to? If that's the way you want to be, then that's fine. But I would surely hate to see you spend eternity over a decision that you made out of ignorance.
It's an eternal, the consequences of that decision are eternal.
Yeah.
And the weight of it. I saw a sign on a church billboard one time, and it said, eternity is a long time to think about what you should have done.
Yeah.
I thought about that a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
We need to be in deep thought about that. And as parents,
yeah.
and as our society and culture, whether it be the police or fire or our armed forces or our branches of government, when you're in those sort of positions of authority, everything that you do and you say weighs a bearing on those that you have responsibility over.
Yes.
And we need to be conscious of that.
Yes.
And it's not about us. It's about the people that we have, authority
Yes.
over.
You made such a tremendous point when we were doing the episode on wisdom.
Right.
That with obtaining wisdom from God is that wisdom is to be used to help others.
Yes. That's it.
And if I do not exercise discipline, if I do not discipline myself, my bad behavior is going to affect others.
Yes.
Maybe my family. I deal with families who have one family member who's addicted to a substance,
Right.
and that one family member affects the entire family. Everyone's
Yeah.
affected by it, usually adversely.
Yeah.
And the one family member could relieve everybody all that suffering just by disciplining themselves.
And if you say that you love, if you have children,
Yeah.
and you say that you love, then show that you love.
Show it. Yes. Yes.
Don't just verbally mouth out, because they see that and they know.
Yeah.
It's being hypocritical. You're not really
Yeah.
showing love. Children want to be disciplined. That's how they know they're loved.
They will try the boundaries
Yeah.
because once they find what the boundaries are, they have a sense of security, and they'll
Yes.
kind of push until they find what the boundaries are.
Yeah, absolutely.
But that'll give them, and God has boundaries for us that
Yeah.
are designed for our own welfare.
Yeah.
And I'm thankful. I've only known about these about 25 years. I didn't always know about those boundaries, but I'm loving living within the boundaries God's prescribed for us. I really.
It's a safe zone.
It's the safe zone. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that's it for today.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, we've reached the end of this episode. And, I think really, to be honest with you, it kind of started off slow, but I felt like we gained a little bit of steam towards the end. But my hope is not for me, but that you guys have got something out of it.
Yeah.
And that, it makes sense, because God doesn't want us to be astray. He wants us to subscribe to His discipline. And, we've talked about episodes about from the Spirit and how He guides us, and He's our conscience now. But, if you truly love, if you say you love includes discipline. Disciplining others if you're in an authority position, a parent or whatever. And it also includes self-discipline. We have to be disciplined ourselves, because others, we ruin our testimony. Even if you're not a believer, we ruin our testimony to ourselves in who we are. If you want good character, if you want to be known with good integrity, then you have to exercise good discipline.
Yes. It's so essential. It's essential. Yeah.
Yep. Yep. Well, we thank you for joining us today, and we hope that you have a great week and that you'll come back and join us next week.
And God bless you, and we thank you for joining us.